Welcome to Celtic Tomes, bringing you readings from bygone books.
Welcome to Celtic Tomes, readings by Gary and Ruth from the classic books of Celtic lore and study. Book 4, Chapter 3 of British Goblins, Welsh Folklore, Fairy Mythology, Legends and Traditions by Wirt Sikes.
Chapter 3, Legendary Welsh Stones, including personal attributes of legendary Welsh stones, stone worship, Canna's stone chair, miraculous removals of stones, the walking stone of Eitheinn, the thigh stone, the talking stone in Pembrokeshire, the expanding stone, magic stones in the Mabinogion, the Stone of Invisibility, the Stone of Remembrance, stone thief catchers, stones of healing, stones at crossroads, memorials of King Arthur, round tables, carns, pots, etc. Arthur's quoits, the gigantic rock tossers of old, Walbec and the pebble in her shoe, the giant of Trichrug, giants and the mythology of the heavens, and the legend of Rhitta Gawr. Section 1. In the traditions concerning Welsh stones, abundant personal attributes are accorded them, such as in nature belong only to animals. They were endowed with volition and with voice. They could travel from place to place without mortal aid. They would move uneasily when disturbed by human contact. They expanded and contracted at will. They clung to people who touched them with profane or guilty purpose. They possessed diverse qualities which made them valuable to their possessors, such as the power of rendering them invisible, or of filling their pockets with gold. In pursuing the various accounts of these stones in Welsh folklore, we find ourselves now in fairyland, now in the domains of Mother Church, now listening to legends of enchantment, now to tales of saintly virtue, now giving ear to a magician, now to a monk. Stone worship, of which the existing superstitions are remains, was so prevalent under the Saxon monarchy that it was forbidden by law in the reign of Edgar the Peaceable, 9th century. And when Canute came in the following century, he also found it advisable to issue such a law. That this pagan worship was practised from a time of which there is now no record is not questioned, and the perpetuation of certain features of this worship by the early Christians was in spite of the laws promulgated for its suppression by a Christian king. In this manner, the monks were enabled to draw to themselves the peasantry in whose breasts the ancient superstition was strong, and who willingly substituted the new story for the old, so long as the underlying belief was not rudely uprooted. Section 2. Among the existing stones in Wales, with which the ancient ideas of occult power are connected, one in Carmarthenshire is probably unique of its kind. It's called Canna's stone, and lies in a field adjoining the old church of Llangan, now remote from the population whose ancestors worshipped in it. The church was founded by an Armorican lady of rank named Canna, who was sainted. The stone in question forms a sort of chair, and was used in connection with a magic well called Ffynnon Canna, which is now, like the church, deserted and wretched. Patients suffering from ague, in order to profit by its healing power, must sit in the chair of Canna's stone after drinking of the water. If they could manage to sleep while in the chair, the effect of the water was supposed to be made sure. The process was continued for some days, sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks. In the middle of this parish there is a field called Parc y Fonwent, or the churchyard field, where according to local tradition the church was to have been originally built, but the stones brought to the spot during the day were at night removed by invisible hands to the site of the present church. Watchers in the dark heard the goblins engaged in this work, and pronouncing in clear and correct Welsh these words, Llangan Damorfan, which means, here is the spot. Similar miraculous removals of stones are reported and believed in other parts of Wales. Sometimes visible goblins achieve the work. Sometimes the stones themselves possess the power of locomotion. The old British historian, Nennius, speaks of a stone, one of the wonders of the Isle of Anglesey, which walks during the night in the valley of Eitheinn. Being once thrown into the whirlpool Cerevus, which is in the middle of the sea called Menai, it was on the morrow found on the side of the aforesaid valley. Also, in Builth is a heap of stones, upon which is one stone bearing the impress of a dog's foot. This was the famous dog of King Arthur, named Pebble, which left its footprint on the stone when it hunted the swine Troint. Arthur himself gathered this heap of stones, with the magic stone upon it, and called it Carn Pebble. And people who take away this stone in their hands for the space of a day and a night cannot retain it, for it returns itself to the heap. The Anglesey stone is also mentioned by Giraldus, through whom it achieved celebrity under the name of Maen Morddwyd, or the thigh stone, a stone resembling a human thigh, which possesses this innate virtue, that whatever distance it may be carried, it returns of its own accord the following night. Hugh, Earl of Chester, in the reign of King Henry I, having by force occupied this island and the adjacent country, heard of the miraculous power of this stone, and for the purpose of trial ordered it to be fastened with strong iron chains to one of a larger size and thrown into the sea. On the following morning, however, according to custom, it was found in its original position, on which account the Earl issued a public edict that no one from that time should presume to move the stone from its place. The countryman also, to try the powers of the stone, fastened it to his thigh, which immediately became putrid, and the stone returned to its original situation. The stone ultimately lost its virtues, however, for it was stolen in the last century and never came back. Section 3. The talking stone, Lech Laval, or stone of loquacity, served as a bridge over the River Alyn, bounding the churchyard of St. David's in Pembrokeshire on the northern side. It was a marble slab worn smooth by the tread of many feet, and was 10 feet long, 6 feet broad, and 1 foot thick. Ancient tradition relates that one day, when a corpse was being carried over it for interment, the stone broke forth into speech, and by the effort cracked in the middle, which fissure is still visible, and on account of this barbarous and ancient superstition, corpses are no longer brought over it. In the same parish as St. David's, there was a flight of steps leading down to the sea, among which there were a certain few which uttered a miraculous sound, like the ringing of a bell. The story goes that in ancient times a band of pirates landed there and robbed the chapel. The bell they took away to sea with them, but as it was heavy, they rested it several times on their way. And ever since that day, the stones it rested upon have uttered these mysterious sounds when struck. Also in this parish is the renowned Expanding Stone, an excavation in the rock of St. Gawain's chapel, which has the magic property of adapting itself to the size of the person who gets into it, growing smaller for a small man and larger for a large one. Among its many virtues was that if a person got into it and made a wish, and did not change his mind while turning about, the wish would come true. The original fable relates that this hollow stone was once solid, that a saint closely pursued by pagan persecutors sought shelter of the rock, which thereupon opened and received him, concealing him till the danger was over, and then obligingly letting him out. This stone may probably be considered as the monkish parallel for the magic stones which confer on their possessor invisibility, as we find them in the romances of enchantment. In the Mabinogion, such stones are frequently mentioned, usually in the favourite form of a gem set within a ring. "Take this ring," says the damsel with yellow curling hair, "and put it on thy finger with the stone inside thy hand, and close thy hand upon the stone, and as long as thou concealest it, it will conceal thee." But when it is found, as we find in following these clues further, that this Stone of Invisibility was one of the 13 rarities of kingly regalia of the island of Britain, that it was formerly kept at Caerleon in Monmouthshire, the city whence St. David journeyed into Pembrokeshire, and that it is mentioned in the triads thus: "The stone of the ring of Luned, which liberated Owen, the son of Urien, from between the portcullis and the wall. Whoever concealed that stone, the stone or bezel would conceal him." The strong probability appears that we are dealing with one and the same myth in the tale of magic and in the monkish legend. Traced back to a period more remote than that with which these Welsh stories ostensibly deal, we should find their prototype in the Ring of Gyges. The Stone of Remembrance is another stone mentioned in the Mabinogion, also a jewel, endowed with valuable properties which it imparts not merely to its wearer, but to any who look upon it. "Goron abwy," says Iddawc to the enchanted dreamer on a yellow calfskin. "Dost thou see the ring with a stone set in it that is upon the emperor's hand?" "I see it," he answered. "It is one of the properties of that stone to enable thee to remember what thou seest here tonight. And hadst thou not seen the stone, thou wouldst never have been able to remember aught thereof." Still another stone of rare good qualities is that which Peredur gave to Eitheinn in reward for his attendance, the stone which was on the tail of a serpent, and whose virtues were such that whosoever should hold it in one hand, in the other he would have as much gold as he might desire. Peredur, having vanquished the serpent and possessed himself of the stone, immediately gave it away, in that spirit of lavish free-handedness which so commonly characterises the heroes of chivalric British romance. Section 4. In the church of St. David's, Llanfaes, according to Giraldus, was preserved among the relics a stone which caught a thieving boy in the act of robbing a pigeon's nest, and held him fast for 3 days and nights. Only by assiduous and long-continued prayer were the unhappy boy's parents able to get him loose from the terrible stone, and the marks of his 5 fingers remained ever after impressed upon it, so that all might see them. There was a stone of similar proclivities in the valley of Mouthweep, which did good service for the church. A certain Saint Tydecho, a relation of King Arthur, who slept on a blue rock in this valley, was persecuted by Maelgwyn Gwynedd. One day this wicked knight came with a pack of white dogs to hunt in the neighbourhood, who sat down upon the saint's blue stone. When he endeavoured to get up, he found himself fastened to his seat, so that he could not stir, in a manner absurdly suggestive of French farces, and he was obliged to make up matters with the saint. He ceased to persecute the good man, and to make amends for the past that gave him the privilege of sanctuary for 100 ages. Section 5. As for stones of healing, with qualities resembling those abiding in certain wells, they appear in many shapes. Now it is a menhir, against which the afflicted peasant must rub himself. Now it is a pebble, which he must carry in his pocket. The inevitable wart reappears in this connection. A stone which cures the wart is found by the roadside, wrapped in a bit of paper, and dropped on a crossroad. To him who picks it up, the wart is transferred. Children in Pembrokeshire will not at the present day pick up a small parcel on a crossroad, suspecting the presence of the wart-bearing stone. In Carmarthen are still to be found traces of a belief in the alluring stone, whose virtue is that it will cure hydrophobia. It is represented as a soft white stone, about the size of a man's head, originally found on a farm called Dysgwylfa, about 12 miles from Carmarthen town. Grains were scraped from the stone with a knife and administered to the person who had been bitten by a rabid dog. And a peculiarity of the stone was that though generation after generation had scraped it, nevertheless it did not diminish in size. A woman who ate of this miraculous stone, after having been bitten by a suspicious cur, testified that it caused a boiling in her blood. The stone was said to have fallen from the sky in the first instance. Section 6. Stones standing at crossroads are seldom without some superstitious legend. A peasant pointed out to me, on a mountain top near Crimlin, Monmouthshire, a crossroads stone, beneath which, he asserted, a witch sleeps by day, coming forth at night. "Least they say so," he explained with a nervous look about him. "But there you, I was never see anything, and I was passed by there many nights. Yes, indeed, often." The man's eagerness to testify against the truth of the tradition was one of the most impressive illustrations possible of lingering superstitious awe in this connection. A famous Welsh witch who used to sleep under a stone at Llanberis in North Wales was called Canna, and her favourite dish at dinner was children's brains. A certain criminal who had received a death sentence was given the alternative of attacking this frightful creature, his life to be spared should he succeed in destroying her. Arming himself with the sharp sword, the doomed man got upon the stone and called on Canna to come out. "Wait till I have finished eating the brains in this sweet little skull," was her horrible answer. However, forth she came presently, when the valiant man cut off her head at a blow. To this day, they scare children thereabout with the name of Canrig Boot. Section 7. In every part of Wales one encounters the ancient memorials of King Arthur, sometimes to be dimly connected with the historical character, but more often with the mythical figure, each with its legend or its bundle of legends, poetic, patriotic, or superstitious. Arthur's Round Table at Caerleon, Monmouthshire, is as well known to every boy in the neighbourhood as any inn or shop of the village. It is a grass-grown Roman amphitheatre, whence alabaster statues of Adrian's day have been disinterred. There's also an Arthur's Round Table in Denbighshire, the flat-topped hill thus called, and in Anglesey another, near the village of Llanfihungle. Arthur's Seat, Arthur's Bed, Arthur's Castle, Arthur's Stone, Arthur's Hill, Arthur's Quoit, Arthur's Board, Arthur's Carn, Arthur's Pot. These are but a few of the well-known cromlechs, rocking stones, or natural objects to be found in various neighbourhoods. They're often in duplicates under these names, but they never bear such titles by other authority than traditions reaching back into the Dark Ages. Some of the stories and superstitions which attach to them are striking, and of the most fascinating interest to the student of folklore. Others are merely grotesque, as in the case of Arthur's Pot. This is under a cromlech at Dolwyllim, on the banks of the Tower, and in the stream itself when the water is high. It is a circular hole of considerable depth, accurately bored in the stone by the action of water. The hole is called Arthur's Pot, and according to local belief, was made by Merlin for the hero king to cook his dinner in. Arthur's quoits are found in many parts of the country. A large rock in the bed of the Saltha mountain, on the Llangadach side of Mynydd D, the Black Mountain, is one of these quoits. The story is that the king one day flung it from the summit of Pen Arthur a mile away. There's another large rock beside it, which was similarly flung down by a lady of Arthur's acquaintance, whose gigantic proportions may be guessed from the fact that this boulder was a pebble in her shoe, which annoyed her. Section 8. Upon this hint, there opens out before the inquirer a wealth of instant and illustration in connection with gigantic Britons of old time who hurled huge rocks about as pebbles. This is the story of the giant Idris, who dwelt upon Cadair Idris, and who found no less a number than 3 troublesome pebbles in his shoe as he was out walking one day, and who tossed them down where they lie on the road from Dolgelly to Bachantleth, 3 bulky crags. There are several legends about Moll Walbec's pebbles in Breconshire. This lusty dame has a full score of shadowy castles on sundry heights in that part of Wales, and she's said to have built the castle of Hay in one night. In performing this work, she carried the stones in her apron. One of these, a pebble about 1 foot thick and 9 feet long, fell into her shoe. At first she did not notice it, but by and by it began to annoy her, and she plucked it out and threw it into the Llawes churchyard, 3 miles away, where it now lies. In many parts of Wales, where lie rude heaps of stones, the peasantry say they were carried there by a witch in her apron. The gigantic creatures, whose dimensions are indicated by these stones, reappear continually in Welsh folklore. Arthur is merely the greatest among them. All were of prodigious proportions. Hugadarn, Cadwaladr, Rhitta Gawr, Brutus, Idris are all members of the shadowy race whose quoits and pebbles are scattered about Wales. The remains at Stonehenge have been from time immemorial called by the Cymry the Cor Gawr, circle or dance of giants. How the Carmarthen enchanter Merlin transported these stones hither from Killara Mountain in Ireland by his magic art, everybody knows. It is only necessary that a stone should be of a size to make the idea of removing it an apparently hopeless one, that Merlin or some other magician brought it there by enchantment, or that Arthur or some other giant tossed it there with his mighty arm. It's a matter of course. It is noteworthy that most of the great stones of these legends appear to have really been transported to the place where they are now found, being often of a different rock than that of the immediate locality. To what extent the legends express the first vague inductions of early geological observers is a question not without interest. The giant of Trichrug, a fairy haunt in Cardiganshire, appears to have been the champion pebble tosser of Wales, if local legend may be trusted. Having invited the neighbouring giants to try their strength with him in throwing stones, he won the victory by tossing a huge rock across the sea into Ireland. His grave is traditionally reported to be on that mountain, and to possess the same properties as the expanding stone, for it fits any person who lies down in it, be he tall or short. It has the further virtue of imparting extraordinary strength to anyone lying in it. But if he gets into it with arms upon his person, they'll be taken from him, and he will never see them more. Section 9. The gigantic stone tossers of Wales associate themselves without effort with the mythology of the heavens. One of their chiefest, Idris, was indeed noted as an astrologer, and is celebrated as such in the Triads. Idris Gawr, or the giant Idris, Gwydion, or the diviner Gwydion, or the diviner by trees, Gwyn, the son of Neith, the generous. So great was their knowledge of the stars that they could foretell whatever might be desired to be known, until the day of doom. And among Welsh legends, none is more familiar than that of Rhitta Gawr, wherein the stars are familiarly spoken of as cows and sheep, and the firmament as their pasture.
That was Book 4, Chapter 3 of British Goblins, Welsh Folklore, Fairy Mythology, Legends and Traditions by Wirt Sikes. A link to the full text can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to comment on this chapter, pop over to our show notes and join in or start a conversation at celtictomes.libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, why not try our sister podcast, the Celtic Myth Pod Show, which brings the stories of ancient Celts to life with narrative and drama, as well as bringing you modern Celtic music, stories and information. Find the Celtic Myth Pod Show in all the places where the best podcasts hang out, or on our website at celticmythpodshow.com. You've been listening to Celtic Tomes, read by Gary and Ruth. This podcast has been produced by the Celtic Myth Show.